Hell yeah. Imagine a US in which every citizen was forced into the role of a combatant. What if this was our reality? How would we react? What strategies would be enacted? How might we protect ourselves from attacks? What if this was not a work of fiction, but a reality, and that our every attempt to cultivate progress and resolve is an utter vain? Since September 11, 2001, the US, including every American alive and born after, has entered into an infinite era of meta war. Meta war is a collapse of temporal limits and overcoming spatial projection by the use of meta attacks and meta weapons. Meta war is an assessment tool elucidates critical vulnerabilities in our democracy. Currently, it attributes gray zone activities and now interstate strategic competition that envelops the core tenets of our national defense strategy as the predominant threat to our American way of life. Every strata and institution in the free world, to include the US, is in a perpetual state of deliberate attack meant to denigrate, disrupt, subvert the future and psychological space of entire populations. These kinds of attacks employed by bad actors, proxies, or core superpowers like China, Russia, Iran, North Korea are rendering the genome obsolete, engineering a predisposed population. Meta war assessment has identified the manipulation of hyperreality, a byproduct of our technological advancement, and the exploitation of moral incommensurability in a political and spiritual hyperpolarized state of affairs. Mark, we are living in some crazy times right now. Multi-generationally speaking, I started taking note of these things roughly around September 11, 2001. I remember sitting down in my 8th grade class, and I remember the history teacher slapping on the tube, and we began to see pictures of the towers. I didn't really know what was going on. All I knew that something had changed. Earlier that day, we got released from school, and I remember walking home, and I remember cars lined up at the gas station, people in a frenzy. We didn't know what was going on. We just knew that, gas was running out, people were in a rush. And ever since then, things have just begun to seem a little bit different every day, and different by I guess the adaptation to this new kind of this era, and this era that I call meta war. I don't think we'll ever go back to a time in history where we're going to look back and say, oh yeah, this was hybrid warfare, or this was asymmetric warfare, or this was conventional warfare. I think from this point on, we're going to be war forever. And what is your assessment, looking at it from a multi-generational outlook? how have things changed from, you know, the 70s up to this point? And what would you say, you know, from lessons unlearned or unknown, where we could protect ourselves?
Well, first, Jose, thank you for having me. Yeah, these are some really deep questions, and you don't hear this type of discussion by the talking heads on primetime television whatsoever. They always find some political way to explain an incident or an event, or they give it a twist and try to give it some popularity and you know, some stroke of light that, you know, well, inevitably this would have happened, you know, and that's your fault. And that's kind of how we are today. Let's cancel each other out instead of take notice. And, you know, across my life, there I am. I would sit in the evening and watch Walter Cronkite with my grandfather. Okay, because I would stay with my grandparents for up to a year at a time, right? And the first time I knew something was really off kilt, you know, because we would sit there and look for one of my uncles on primetime news because he was in Vietnam, you know, and my grandparents would sit there looking for him or listening and watching and stuff like that. And because my grandfather was always reading the newspaper or Time magazine or Life magazine or National Geographic and stuff like that, I followed his example. And because I was learning to read at that time too, I wanted to know more about the world, you know, and little by little, I would sit there and I would gain that understanding, kind of like Antonio Banderas in 13th Warrior. He sat there with those Norsemen over and over and over again until he finally understood what the hell they were saying, and he was talking back to them, and they were like, okay, little brother, you know? And so I had that kind of thing happen to me where I just remained engaged. And we were sitting there one night, and Yasser Arafat, okay, you know, the chairman of the PLO, Palestine Liberation Organization, did an address to the United Nations. And I drew a conclusion to myself. I don't think I was any more than 7 or 8 years old at the time. And I said, that guy's a bad guy. You know, my grandfather was like, how do you know? You know, and I explained what I thought to him. And he was like, okay, let's listen. You know, and we sat there and we watched it. And sure as shit, you know, in the 72 Olympics, okay, the Israeli team was actually assaulted and killed in Munich, you know? And so that's when I had this confirmation that this was happening. And then, of course, throughout the 70s, you had, you know, relative terrorist groups that were you know, aligned with communist stuff. And then, you know, we had a discussion yesterday with Philip, and he talked about the Special Forces Berlin unit that was out there. And that's a really compelling story as a counterterrorism response that the United States had that not a lot of Americans know anything about. This is a predecessor to Delta Force. And we responded. That's how we responded. But it was all happening in Europe. Baader Meinhof gang, which later became the Red Army faction, Japanese Red Army, a whole host of different terrorist organizations were beginning to reveal themselves. They were conducting bombings on open bases. They were bombing discos, you know, and clubs and you know, other open places where a lot of American troops and their families would go and shop, you know, on the economy and stuff like that. So they were being completely targeted. Italy was going through the same thing at the same time. And then ironically, when I joined the Marine Corps, I was pretty well attuned to what was going on. And of course, while I was in boot camp, that's when the American embassy was taken over in Tehran, Iran, you know, by the old Ayatollah Khomeini's crowd of folks. And of course, that just stirred the pot. But, and my thought process on where it all began for Americans to want to fight this problem. And that happened in Beirut in 1983 when, 241 Marine sailors and soldiers were killed by one of the largest non-nuclear weapons ever detonated. And when if you go hunt around in like Pinterest and places like that and see some of the footage and images and stuff like that, it was devastating. It was horrible, and I've been pissed off ever since. And ironically, I was going into my Hell Week at Amphibious Reconnaissance course, and I was also the class leader. So you can only imagine, we went from 42 troops in my class that week down to probably 17. That's how bad we were getting thrashed. But that also shows that the desire of those guys that wanted to stay the course, because we were ready to go and fight at that point. Because we already knew there was a reconnaissance platoon that was inside the Mao headquarters that was destroyed, gone. All those men were dead. So we're like, let's train. And, if I get picked, that's it. This is going to be the response. But look how long it took for us to actually respond. There's been so many evident incidences, for instance, in the Persian Gulf during the Iran-Iraq war, we were getting a lot of activity from the Iranians. And, just like we do today, it's never ended. Yeah. It's been going on for well over 35 years, And this one particular incident, though, there was a passenger aircraft that was flying over the Persian Gulf, but it was in one of those no-fly zones, loaded with civilians. And there's hearsay that says that it was filled with, dead bodies already, and they did it on purpose just to test our systems so they could get a better understanding of how technical we were. But anyways, that particular destroyer shot that aircraft down with anti-aircraft weapon systems, and apparently, everybody that was on board that aircraft. What you haven't heard, though, is that skipper of that ship, who lived in San Diego a couple of years later, almost had a vehicle overrun by IRGC agents from Iran in San Diego. Okay? They actually planted an incendiary device on his wife's vehicle. Okay? And on that particular day, this Navy captain decided that he was going to take the family vehicle to work instead. And it ignited, but it didn't have its effect. And he was being followed, and they shot at him while he was trying to exit the vehicle because they wanted to make sure that he was gone. But they got caught too. But then there's that diplomatic little thing that was happening too. Other events, so-called allies. All right, you saw what happened with Khashoggi. They lured that guy in. He was living here in the United States freely, but he was also, very critical of the Saudi Arabian crown. And they got him in a Saudi Arabian embassy annex and chopped him to pieces and got rid of him. That's a proven fact. So what do? What do our state-sponsored representatives actually do? Got to ask ourselves that. But that's what causes this and maintains that undercurrent of constant warfare. That if we popularize it, let's say, in Hollywood or some derivative thereof, or independently, we're kind of glorifying the thought, and therefore people remain aggressive that way. That's just my simple thought process on how we've perpetuated this, but how long I've endured it too.
Yeah. I think in 2016, there were some Pew Research polls that were taken, and the American people, the cohort from those studies came out and said that the American military is the last institution in the United States that the American population has some trust in. And I think it's been very, very difficult to try to, I'm not saying justify, but just to discuss the multi-layered narratives from the actual threats that are out there, the way war has transformed. And for a lot of folks, a lot of folks don't realize that the last declared war was in World War II. It's over 70 years ago. Ever since then, we've had authorized military force. And not only that, war has changed. It's no longer conventional war. War has become, they call it now the gray zone, where everything operates under conventional warfare. And in that threshold, we're looking at lawfare, economic warfare. We're looking at the IO campaigns that we see. We're looking at artificial islands being created by the Chinese. We're looking at the disruption and the subversion of our allies so that some of these superpowers and proxies can't gain our allies. And for the American people, I think it's very difficult for them to understand the complexities that go with that. And not only that, we've had to adapt to some of these changes. And what I've seen so far in my studies is that, you know, I call American troops these social artifacts. No one likes to see on the tube American soldiers dying, right? So what I've seen so far is we reverted to this old strategy from cotillion-based strategies. And now we're entering a domain of silent warfare where we're responding to these gray zone activities and to a lot of these proxies and bad state actors with very silent clandestine techniques. And I think, you know, America in itself doesn't like the idea of secrecy. But I do think that there is some level of justification that we have to do these kinds of operations, in part because it's not like I can go to, you know, China and talk with President Xi Jinping and say, hey, brother, how about we quell this whole situation and move into an era of, you know, of utopian type, you know, times. It ain't going to happen. It ain't going to happen. I don't think people respond to that very well. Looking at your history, was there ever a time where we've seen a kind of polarization like we see today? I mean, we can no longer really, we can't agree on key issues. If there is some form of, you know, kinetics taking place, we can't respond with authorized military force. So we've had to, in part, change the way we do certain kinds of activities. And I know one of those things is sanctions. But doing sanctions also creates other issues. People can't eat. People can't work. The economy in some of these places falter. And that also leads to a kind of ugly cycle. What kinds of parallels have you seen throughout your time?
In my life, you know, the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights era had a lot of positives and negatives, you know, impacts that took place. It's just the nature of human beings, you know, and you could probably take that same template and put it on the Revolutionary War, where we decided to fight back against the English. And then, of course, then you got to put your feet, you know, in Sitting Bull's moccasins and realize what they were doing too. That was their version of fighting back. And, you know, by that time, the American military had already become so powerful that it couldn't stop tribal warfare, you know, on our own lands. But look what we've done, though, and what we've experienced, you know, as a nation, with these types of treaties and types of warfare, etc. The flexibility and adaptability that the American actually has in any type of political climate, any type of technology-driven conflict, etc. Yeah, we're pretty darn good, but we're pretty darn bad too. You know, we can do some really bad things, and history's shown that. And nobody that was there that day that broke in and trespassed upon their property has since been rolled up. You know, so you got to really examine these micro events when they take place, because now you're seeing how our laws are being manipulated in order for some side to have a political advantage rather than justice.
Yeah, I've often wondered about this. I try to put this on a spectrum. I think there's several things that are taking place. One, we've entered an era of hyperreality. And it's basically, we live in an artificial culture where everything is seamlessly blended together. We don't know what's real, what's unreal. And part of that is you literally have an information ecosystem that has just been bombarded with one, misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, and a whole host of pathogenic memeplexes. And for people who don't know what that means, is we've had these, significant social issues brought to the light, but they are subverted by people who, one, are trolls, shit posters, or have some agenda to pollute and pervert something like that. But also, we're also seeing, these gray zone activities, which is an information operation or a global psyop to disrupt, this democratic experiment. And so when I say I look at this in a multi-layered way on the spectrum, we've kind of entered into this realm of emotivism, right? Where there's this, lack of moral standard. It's been broken down. And I think in part of this has been the response to the secularization of religion, the manipulation of law, the perversion of these mediated monolithic things that we call the news. And when you have, these things simultaneously taking place, the American people who, one, have either grown up in adverse effects or adverse environments, two, don't know any better, don't have proper training to decipher and examine and dissect, or just plain trying to live out their life, can't really comprehend what is really, really taking place. And for the first time, I think we have to come to grips with understanding that there is no one single source of information, ideology, or abstraction that's going to give us the resolve we need. And to get to that point, there has to be a level of cohesiveness. And right now, that level of cohesiveness is disrupted. I think for me, when I assess what's taking place in the United States, I sometimes wish that people could experience what I experienced on the battlefield. There was this level of brotherhood that existed. And I think for a lot of folks, we have this idea that, some of the military operations that we conducted were somehow imperialistic, colonialist. And, sure, we could look at coin. We could look at how David Galula, did his coin operation. We could look at how David Petraeus retrofitted that kind of doctrine. And we can also look at how the models of cultural awareness and cultural sense making were conducted across the spectrum of operational forces. And there is some good to that. Not everything that we did overseas was completely, kinetic. I think there was some good that was being done. And, it's gonna continuously, be in flux, the way the American people see how we conducted those kinds of operations. But the salient factors in the operational environment is we seldomly discuss these kinds of properties, right? Like, does love exist on the battlefield? Does justice exist on the battlefield? And, I fought with the IA, the IP, the ANA, the ANCOP, and all across the spectrum, when bullets were flying, when people were dying, you better believe that everyone had each other's back. And there are just some words that can't really be expressed or discussed or articulated that envelops or even comes close to talking about this idea of brotherhood. And coming back from the operational spectrum into the United States, it's like walking into a jungle of an unknown, right? It's like walking into a cesspool where none of these kinds of properties or these kinds of spectrums exist. And I wish that every American could have a piece of what we experience to come to this idea that I love you no matter what. Your politics don't bother me. I'm going to be subjective and objective all at once. And I think in part, one of the reasons why we can't agree on that is because these traditional formats have now become to deconstruct themselves throughout, time. Faith has played an important role in my life. Religion has played an important role in my life. But more importantly, philosophy has played an important role in my life. And what I say to a lot of folks when we look at the polarization in this country is I say, look, Western democracy is a white supremacist project. We defeated that project every time we went on the battlefield, every time somebody of a different race, color, or creed died, every time I told somebody I loved them, every time we shared a heartbreak or a glorious moment. And I think that's multi-generational. I think that's the tradition that has extended. And it's very, very, very difficult to try and absorb and process, some of these social issues, some of the threats that are, in the United States. It's just one of those things that's very difficult to discuss, in part because, one, these social issues have been perverted. If we look at the Russian attempts to disrupt our information ecosystem, right? We look at the Internet Research Agency, and the Internet Research Agency was a Russian state-sponsored web brigade meant to disrupt the information ecosystem. And essentially, they affected 126 million Facebook viewers and people who were on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And they literally targeted specific key issues, and they perverted it, they disrupted it. And now any attempt to discuss in some form of objective way what it is that one specific demographic is, going through, you can't do it because it's just all been perverted. So looking forward into future operations, recently there was an article released that the armed services is going to begin to now focus on the information cybersecurity spectrum. And I think within about a year, we're going to have some maritime solutions going out. And when I look at that, it's very vague, but I also look at how we disrupted ISIS cyber caliphate, right? We haven't completely neutralized it, but we essentially disrupted it to the point where they could no longer recruit, which allowed, joint operations to take place and physically destroy ISIS's physical caliphate. So what ended up taking place was we had Operation Glowing Symphony, and it was conducted by NASA or the NSA and the military. And essentially what they did was they ended up hacking ISIS's servers, their financial assets, their mobile devices. They started draining their powers, freezing their accounts. And what it did was it allowed at least the physiological aspects of specific populations to come back to equilibrium.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's going to end up taking place in about a year from now, is that we've identified where the misinformation, the disinformation is taking place. And now we're going to go ahead and begin to quell those technologies so that the American people can get back to trying to find real solutions to these problems without being bombarded with disinformation and carrying this entire dilemma forward.
Well, that's still a choice for those that want to remain comfortable the way they are, or business as usual, or whatever. I felt that way myself in February. Matter of fact, I was actually listening that COVID-19, the first discussions of that was starting to happen in like late November, early December. Caught my ear, and as you know, I was an NBC fucking chief for a little while, and I really devoted myself to those duties. And, I got particular certifications to learn a little bit more about nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare, which is now CBRN-E. the way it's discussed now. And because I had a background with explosives before then, I always kind of blended them together as a result of large IEDs like Beirut, and of course the first World Trade Center bombing that took place, and stuff like that. Why I bring it up in this kind of context, these were factual events that actually took place, but we didn't milk the value out of it. We kept it on the down low. We didn't bother getting the public involved of, hey, maybe it's time you guys start taking a look at neighborhood watch systems and things like that in order to provide yourself better security. And then, commercial internet was launched in the mid 90s, and people were doing perverted shit right off the bat with it, but there was other people out there too, many, many, many more, utilizing it for entertainment, utilizing it for commercial business and stuff like that. And once we started to generate tons of information and life was moving at light speed, okay, anything goes, because it was like the wild, wild west. Nobody's going to stop this. And then you had analysts that were looking at, where the heck are all these, millions and millions of dollar projects popping up successfully out of nowhere? We got to go see what's going on, and if you remember, right in the middle of the first Obama term, there was a photovoltaic company here in California that was given billions of dollars to help out with, I guess, their first attempt at the Green New Deal, so to speak. And they lost everything, and nobody knew where the money went. You see? So when they learn how to rob the till electronically, okay, we're going to make ourselves wealthy, and we're going to use every tool in the toolbox to make sure that we do, and right now it's this, distorted environment where you got guys like, Mitch McConnell on the right, and then some of these other guys on the left doing some dirty deeds done dirt cheap and making gazillions of dollars via the Chinese, but then at the same time they're talking out the other side of their mouth going, America first, and we're going to have over 500,000 acres of hemp growing in, Kentucky, and we got a big deal with some beer company up in Canada, so we don't have to, take a fall that way, and it's just going to be nothing but money. Yay for us, and how many jobs did that build for anybody? When you decided to go ahead and increase agriculture in Kentucky, what did it do to the environment? What did it provide for economic development? And why did you partner with somebody in Canada? What's the give and trade here? Because, we've been unable to finish the Keystone XL pipeline for a variety of reasons here in the United States of America. And most of that's kind of a leftist environmental type activism that's preventing that from happening, to include Native American lands that they wanted to pass that on through. So was that really the balance? We'll trade you the energy of hemp, where you convert it into, a product, but at the same time, we're going to do this for however many years. And we discovered that, you and me and John and a few other people, that same type of give and take was taking place out there in eastern North Carolina with the Arundo. Miscanthus was going to be grown. What am I saying? But it's a biofuel. Oh, and we forgot to talk about, the back office, hairy belly, cigar chomping deal that took place with Mike McIntyre, the representative that ran that district at the time, with a Italian company that was going to be the biofuels reduction company and manufacturer. Okay. So did anybody in North Carolina actually know that was happening? No, we were engaged in war in Iraq and Afghanistan at that time. And the majority of the demographic that lived in that area were all soldiers and airmen from the Fort Bragg area. See, so by default, okay, well, you know, maybe we'll get their vote next time, but this time we're just going to go for it. You know, so it happens on both sides of the fence. And if you're not looking for it, if you're not investigative, then you're going to miss it, you know? And we figured it out too at the farm. John and I did, because we started to see vehicles pulling up and watching us. People we didn't know, people we never saw before in that area, you know? And we were kind of outwardly vocal about some things that were happening out there. You know, for instance, you had a CrossFit gym that was owned by some special forces dude who was also doing DSS PSD work overseas. And he wanted to open up some type of, you know, mini Blackwater operation out there, you know, in Eastern North Carolina. And we caught him trying to do this. They were trying to fit their way in. But ironically, what you find out is that the majority of those leaned lands out there, because they had all those farms in subsidy for so long, the proficiency and technical ability, or even the contracts for those old aged farmers to do work anymore, it had passed. And a generation had gone by that had no interest in doing agriculture. Okay. So there it was. We can do industrial farming again. So this is cotton tobacco phase 3. We're going to bring in this biofuel, and we're going to sell this to the public somewhere. They'll use it. And, oh, by the way, the industrial farming company was a Chinese-owned company.
Mm.
Okay? Look at all that shit. I mean, that's a bunch of stuff to figure out.
Yeah.
But it was led by an elected official who ingratiated himself in the long run in a strategy that flew under the radar, while also, you know, telling veterans, hey man, I got your back.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. So many times, I don't know what it was. And so the way I explain how this part of the brain or the human body as an antenna works is that it's kind of like learning a second language. So puedo hablar en español, I can speak in Spanish. And if I look at, you know, this piece of paper right here, I know that it's the color white in English. And then I know it's blanco en español. But more than often, I see the paper, I understand that it's white, but also it's also processing that it's blanco in a different language. And there's nothing unusual about that. But then there are those moments where there's no way on earth that you could physically see a certain particular kind of an ambush or bomb in the ground. Sometimes it's just a gut feeling, or sometimes you receive flashes of an event taking place in a particular time and space. And that's something that's very, very unique in itself, and that's what they call anomalous cognition. And I've experienced this on innumerable occasions, and even got to the point where we were map dowsing. We would sit in the COC late at night, and we would look at this huge topographical map, satellite map, and we would feel out where a cache would be or where Taliban would be. And sure enough, the following day, man, it was freaking there.
Yeah.
It's wild, man.
So I had a particular incident happen to me. We were working close with Het on some people that we were bringing into the police organization. We've done a couple of screenings of these people, biometric collections and stuff like that. And we found out some details through the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Interior, who these Iraqi men were. Some of them were Ba'athist officers, you know, in the past and stuff like that. And they wanted to make some money doing this and that and get some authority. But we also knew things were tribal there. So you start pulling all these factors together, et cetera. Then there was this increase. We were approaching what was called the Provincial Security Council was about to happen in April 2005. Okay. And so my boss was having daily contact with the governor of El Anbar, the provincial police chief, and a whole host of other ministry officials that were living in the Ramadi area and trying to get the city back online. And of course, get some functionality out of the province, you know, where there was some type of limited security problems. Okay. But lo and behold, Triple Canopy loses their contract to Blackwater. Okay. And they come into Ramadi, fucking letting everybody know it's Blackwater and we're going to be here on the anniversary of the killings in Fallujah. And we're bringing, you know, the State Department guy back into Ramadi. So, you know, the provincial governor and some of these other ministries can begin to interact with the American diplomatic channels and maybe get some industry up and running and you know, reset security out here and stuff like that. And as soon as I heard that, I knew shit was going to hit the fan. And I knew exactly how it was going to hit the fan and how long it might last as well. And no sooner did Blackwater show up, shit was on. It was on. Like for an entire week straight, there was nothing but combat in that city. And that was the result of the wrong component coming into the environment while we were trying to reset security. What the fuck? Who came up with that stupid plan? You know? And they were, the Iraqis were actually broadcasting it on, you know, existing radio stations. The mosques were making calls of it and all that stuff. And Blackwater finally realized, hey man, this is not cool. You guys don't have your shit together out here. It's like, it wasn't us. It was you. You know, they were trying to cancel the brigade that was operating that area. You know, all the Marine Corps infantry, all of the Army infantry that were out there doing their job each and every day, and and all of that. But I saw that. It was like a premonition. You know, and I was hoping it would never come back before it ever happened. And that prayer didn't get heard, apparently. But then, was that a strategic move to try and draw some people out, you know, and start a fight, you know, so we could really go ahead and begin to see where some of the caches were. So about midway of that week, shit was just happening. And I kept on hearing stuff through my turret over the radio. And I said, you know what? 1-5 has not checked the other side of this wall over here. There's got to be listening devices, because every time we launch a patrol out of the government center, something's happening. Sniper attack, IED is found. Their momentum gets slowed down, so they get set up and put into pockets. Lieutenant Heisman, what's in these offices on the other side over here? He goes, oh, it's nothing. Those are just government offices over there. Most of the time, there's nothing in them. And I said, let's go over there. And he goes, well, I don't know, Top. And I was like, sir, I want to see what's in there, because I think that somebody's eavesdropping on you. And you haven't put 2 and 2 together yet. And so we went over there and we found brand new with Soviet Cyrillic symbols on it, brand new fucking eavesdropping equipment in the next office on the other side of the bulkhead from their COC.
Wow.
You know? And so when I started to see these micro events taking place, I knew these were very similar things that the Viet Cong used to do in particular types of terrain. And I had to sit down with those lieutenants in Alpha Company and say to them, this urban terrain that you guys are responsible over here looks almost the same as pathways into Hue City in the Vietnam War. and they may actually even be subsurface and pop up somewhere inside this fucking compound one of these days and start hammering your asses. So you better, do your patrol duties a little bit differently, And I said, I'll go on patrol with you guys. I don't have a fucking problem, but because I want to see this, because my police security plans are going to have to be virtually the same as what you're doing, because at some point or another, you're going to turn over this compound to them. And they need to know what it was that we experienced, because the Mooj aren't going to leave. And you heard what I wrote later on in that article that I read to you earlier. So this is happening all on, one, deep diving into modern warfare, two, trusting my gut. And then not only that, realizing that if I dreamed something, okay, this is an anomaly that's coalescing, and I better pay attention to it because it's probably going to happen, and it did many times, and you got to pay attention. You got to be like, kind of observe things from the enemy's perspective. And if that's how they're operating, and we actually use Militant Tricks by John Poole as the primer that I trained my Marines from before we went overseas. And as soon as we got in the environment, the guys are like, oh, fuck, I see all of it. I'm not going to get ambushed here. I can see things already. And I knew that we were under surveillance. They're trying to figure us out, and that's when I decided I better write a report, and I better request an assessments officer to come here and confirm my observations, because nobody's going to believe me. My boss believed me because he was going through it too. Okay. You would think that, being a lieutenant colonel put into a position of risk that he was in with us, that somebody would listen to him. And nope, they didn't want to listen to him neither.
Wow. Why is that? Why is it?
We were that good. They didn't think that we were that fucking locked on. So they sent Cameron Grahams, and you know what resulted there. I said, sir, it's like fucking Chesty Puller at the Chosin Reservoir. We got a room full of freaking Iraqis that can go off here in a second. And luckily for us, we got grenades. He's like, what? And he's shaking out. He wasn't attuned to the environment that we were. That this is a violent fucking place, okay? And you got to be ready to do a 180 and start shooting in that direction, and then get back on security again, because we're surrounded all the time. And once you accept that, you're turned on. And then all those things in your instinct, you better trust them. You better not speculate. Otherwise, you're going to get somebody hurt or yourself killed.
Yeah. That's one of the shifts that I've seen so far now in 2020, is the fact that they're introducing analytic models to kind of – so your distributed operations paper was a precursor to what is a little bit more crystallized format for people in operations to convey a message that is from a gut feeling, from an intuitive process into a real-time resolve. And so I still feel that they need to, there's still an element there that is somewhat mystical, but the analytical model is supposed to represent a way of introducing that mystical nature of intuitive processes, high executive decision-making process.
Yep. But that's where our conversation went. It was staring me right in the face. It was about dealing with spirits and being in a constant state of prayer, because you're constantly being bombarded with those ethereal, supernatural powers, and they're not all good. And you have to have rituals in order to go ahead and defend yourself and, take care of yourself. We did a discussion last week about holding your angels until wrestling with your angels until the morning comes. And it's a heck of a ritual, because if you feel troubled to the point where you just can't come up with a solution, you have to fucking pray, and if you don't learn to wrestle your own angels, you're going to get ignored at some point, and then you go into a shit cycle. And then you're going to wonder, what the heck, what am I doing wrong? Well, I'm not praying enough. I'm not thankful enough. I'm not treating myself well enough. And maybe there was some other stuff happening between yourself and other people that you didn't get completely resolved. And, that seems to fit within those patterns as well, that somebody's trying to force a rift between you and somebody else. And you got to solve that right off the bat.
Yeah, that makes you wonder about what's taking place in the United States in regards to that. Where is forgiveness in all of this? Where is loving your neighbor in all of this? How can on one level say that you despise and hate a particular thing, but yet then say to your fellow countryman who's in the same struggle as you that you love them? And you know what I mean? Even in combat, man, there was a level of respect amongst your enemies, despite knowing the fucking horrible things that were going to take place, right? It's so baffling, like that is a non-existent component of our everyday life. I had a conversation with Peter not too long ago. It's just like either you have the faith in humanity or you don't. I mean, you have to commit to something. And if your commitments are wrong, then your fruits are going to be wrong. What your harvest is going to be wrong. And you're going to know that you're wrong. So where is the forgiveness in all of this? Is the forgiveness, once again, some kind of a reparation? Is the forgiveness, another genocide? This country's got to heal, and there isn't enough spiritual infrastructure to go ahead and allow that to happen.
Well, to your point, this is how I feel after 40 years of the shit that I subjected myself to. And I knew that after what I saw on the ground, getting the Iraqis out of Kuwait, okay, because that's what we expected. Burned up, fucking charred, destroyed humans and equipment and stuff like that at scale. And it was exactly that. But that was just the front end of it. Just wait till you get to the other side of Kuwait and saw the highway to hell, okay? And they were trying to evacuate out of Kuwait because they knew we were coming, hardcore. And it was just for 100 miles, just nothing but total fucking devastation out there, But that really didn't get to me. What got to me was a young Harrier pilot. We were in Dubai, I think. We went in on a Liberty call into Dubai, and in this port area where our ships came in, they had a place called the British Club, and all staff NCOs and officers were allowed to go into the British Club and get a meal and drink some beer and hang out. Well, I was doing kind of bodyguard work for General Rowe. I was the ops chief for Surveillance, Reconnaissance, Intelligence Support Group 5 for the 5th MEB. And so me and a couple of my guys, we're sitting over on the other side of this room and just kind of watching things going on. And then whenever, the general would go back on the ship and stuff like that, we made sure that, things were fucking all clear for him. And all of a sudden I hear this young captain had gotten fucking drunk, and he was starting to talk shit about, why the fuck, sir? Why didn't you have us stop doing that? There was no reason why we should have kept on bombing them. We knew that they were fucking leaving, And I finally got up. I was just a staff sergeant at the time. And I walked over there and I said, Skipper, I think it's time to go get some fucking fresh air. Don't tell me what to do, staff sergeant. I've seen your ass walking around the ship. Fuck you, And that's when General Rowe got up and he said, Captain, get your ass up and go for a walk with the staff sergeant. You need to get some fresh air. Okay. And he was about to fucking lose his shit again. I just stayed with his captain for, you know, an hour just walking around the port until he got his fucking shit back together. And he was fucking, you know, he'd done some serious bombing. He'd done some strafing runs and just fucked a lot of shit up. And he was fucked up from it, you know? And I said, sir, I understand, you know, that maybe this is it. Maybe you're done after this or something. He goes, man, I just don't understand. I was like, that's modern warfare. Okay. They asked for it. You fucking handed them their ass. And that's how it goes. What I wasn't prepared for, though, was when we went into Bangladesh about a month and a half later, after a cyclone waylaid the fucking country and then a big old flood came blowing through there. And I mean, just hundreds of thousands of people, Jose, fucking hanging in trees and floating in the ocean and in rivers and shit like that. And or you go to a village and there's no adults, it's just fucking young children. Like, hey, where's everybody at? And they take you to the graveyard. And you're just going, holy fuck, what happened here? You know, this is horrible. And that sat with me for a long time as well. I think about that every time I hear about a tsunami or, you know, some natural disaster where, you know, a lot of people are going to get fucked up and they didn't take the time to prepare and they had all the resources necessary and yet they still procrastinated as if it can't be happening, you know? And so 40 years of that shit, and it still affects you to this day. You know, the shit that you've seen, things that you've smelled, okay, how you felt, the loss of your friends is probably the worst. So every once in a while, you got to check in with yourself. And I like the fact that, you know, in the American system, we do have Veterans Day and we do have Memorial Day, okay? And now they're calling 9/11 Patriots Day, which, you know, it sits okay with me, you know. And it was reinforced last night when I watched that show about the Las Vegas shootings and what I told you earlier about what people did for each other, you know. So why's it got to be like that? And then how long is it going to take for every one of those individuals to, you know, clear their own head space and you know, live something of a semblance of normal? Because those types of impacts right there should not make us more aggressive. Those types of impacts right there, they should be the ones where we give that forgiveness to ourselves. You know, you were there. Tell me your story. You know, just like we do and when we come off of a deployment, we get those groups and you know, well, tell us your story. I was there for 6 months and now I'm here. Okay, so you're going to be stubborn and not talk about it. And are you going to come to the rest of the sessions? Maybe. You know, if I don't have to, I won't. Oh. Do you challenge somebody like that? And you said something earlier that clicked in me too. Do you remember a guy? Oh, I can't remember his name anymore, man. He was there at UNCW right when you got in UNCW. And he was a horrible drunk. Young guy. He was a communicator with the grunts. Remember what I'm talking about? Brown hair.
I can't remember.
I can't remember his name anymore, man. But I spoke to his mother. His father refused to speak to me, but I spoke to his mother, who was an executive with United Way in Nashville, Tennessee. And they had a particular perspective about their son, that until he owns up to his alcoholism, he's probably never going to be able to deal with his PTSD kind of thing. You know, God, what was his name? But I saw the potential in that young man, and we just couldn't get him squared away. He wouldn't do it, you know?
Yeah, I think about that a lot with a lot of guys. One, you can't replicate, right? So that's whether it was a 4 years or 30-year military career, there's something about that time period, right? There was regiment, there was order, there was a support between your buddy teams, your fire teams, and your squads. And then that transition takes place where you move from point A to point B, and then it's out here. You can't replicate that. You can't replicate that process. And that's kind of a hard line issue with a lot of folks that, okay, if I can't replicate that, then what's in place where I can fall back on something where I don't go down that path? And that's why I believe firmly that, this life endeavor has to culminate with those centers of excellence. I mean, that was a pivotal moment in my life when you began to discuss centers of excellence, right? Incorporate some form of education, continuing education, the arts, sustainability, and continue this overall development for these individuals who have participated in probably one of the most extreme occupations that they could ever participate in. But I think about that a lot because I know a lot of guys who struggle with that specific kind of thing. I was there too, almost, 6 years.
Paul Bergman, was that his name? Paul Bergman? He might have gone by another name, Steve or something like that. The last name was Bergman.
I can't remember. I can't recall.
Sorry for interrupting. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I don't know. I ran into so many. It's hard, man, to try to keep up with all that.
Yeah, I felt guilty for a little while because I could see the potential, but he wouldn't, back down. And I was like, I can't help you until you start helping yourself. I'm not telling you to not call me, but I'm going to tell you call me drunk and I'm not going to fucking talk to you.
Yeah. The book called Hagakure, there's a portion in there where it talks about how samurai, when they weren't allowed to yawn, and to yawn was a sign of disrespect. So what they would do is they would tap their forehead to change their physiology. And so in that, consideration, I've often thought that some of these guys need a good smack in the face to remember the fight, the fire. And I think, that's why a lot of guys participate in some of these extreme sports. Or, it goes on that spectrum, either participating in some kind of an extreme substance use or some kind of an extreme, activity. But, at some point you have to find balance.
Yeah. There was a good discussion I was watching yesterday with Joe Rogan and Tim Kennedy. And that same topic came up, Rogan was like, actually, Tim Kennedy gave Joe Rogan a gift, gave him a gun and some cigars and stuff like that. And then Joe was like, hey, so, do you ever imbibe? Do you take a sip of some whiskey or whatever? He goes, I have a glass of wine every other day, and that's it. And I've never abused any substances and stuff like that, but I've been, a very focused athlete my entire life. Then they got into the discussion of, okay, well, that's your addiction then. You go, well, I won't say that. I just try to improve myself a little as I go and so on and so forth. And then they got into some details on, well, if that's what you Jones for, that is your addiction, and it doesn't matter how you want to frame it. It is what it is, and so, yes, the elite amongst us, especially CrossFit athletes, have that kind of tendency to overtrain, and they're constantly injured because they don't really understand what they got themselves into. They see the long-term possibilities of what they could look like and perform like, and they're willing to go ahead and do anything they possibly can in order to achieve that. But there's so many little tiny things that were never taught in high school PE, let alone going into some personal fitness classes and things like that in college, if those are available, or getting a gym membership and learning to do it right. You know, proper lifting starts off with, you know, biomechanical movements that look like Olympic lifts, when in fact those are functional movements that will diminish over time. And by the time you get to be in your 60s and 70s, you probably will not have any muscle mass whatsoever because you're too afraid to do a squat, a deadlift, or a lunge, let alone pushing things away from you or overhead, you know, and that becomes a confidence issue. So you can't be a CrossFit athlete once you've got to that level of atrophy. So you have to dedicate yourself to health, wellness, and fitness in the beginning of it all in order to have, you know, the ability to continue to do these types of endurance activities at my age or older, you know, because believe me, I hurt a lot,
Oh yeah.
you know, from my feet all the way up into, you know, my head sometimes, but that's okay because I get something out of this. That physiological response I get from accepting the challenge, getting through the initial parts of the pain, and then get my stride going, and I can feel the adrenaline and all the good hormones moving around in my body. I'm happy as hell. You know, I'm happy as hell for that next hour, whatever I'm doing. I'm just glad that I made that decision instead of just, you know, sit on the porch and watch birds fly by and, you know, there goes another 10 fucking years. And next thing you know, you're living in an old folks home. That ain't me.
I make it on Sundays, man. I make it a conscious effort to change up my routine from just going to the gym and participate. So I do a minimal of 3 training sessions a day, but on Sunday I dedicate it to strictly breaking out the metabolic waste that's built up in my body. And by myofascial stretching, I have a serious roller. So I do a series of HIIT exercises and I stop. And that's when I roll out all those areas where I feel the tension. And man, it feels so good. And two, switching from an active occupation, being from operations, to sitting and having to dress in a particular way, i.e., dress shoes, that really messes up my balance, man, my functionality.
Mm-hmm.
So Sundays are my way of going ahead and rebalancing myself for Monday. Mondays are critical, man. You know, a lot of folks hate Mondays, right? It's like, oh, I got the bad case of Mondays. No, Mondays set the tone for how you're going to start the week and finish the week. And I make it, Mondays, it's go time. So Sunday I make it, I prep for that. There's PCCs, PCIs for Monday.
Sounds like a perfect plan to me. You know, because that's you heard my comments earlier about going out to that ranch and you know, helping Sharon out there and stuff like that too. That's what I spent the rest of the afternoon doing. You know, washing my clothes and cleaning up my space, probably preparing at least 3 meals for that week to include my lunch that I was going to take with me the next morning, get that stuff packed up, ready to go, stuff folded up, et cetera, make a couple of phone calls, and time for bed.
Yeah,
that's how it was.
Yeah.
And I didn't like it because I had already gotten into, you know, a living with a family, you know, so everything was kind of unpredictable. I mean, I could have a linear plan and stuff like that then, but it's fluid. So you got to be flexible, you know, in a family environment. And then I was back to quote unquote barracks life again, on my own. I don't live that way here because this place is constantly dirty. Otherwise I'd be cleaning all the fucking time. You know, you got to learn to live this way. It's like living in the old West, you know? I mean, at any given moment, fucking stagecoach come rolling up here, you know? And that's how dirty it is here. And so, you know, I might find time to do some extreme cleaning, maybe twice a week because it's got to get dusted, you know, and then of course, high alkalinity in the water. So a lot of times I've got to do some treatments to the toilets because it can smell bad, you know, so they got to get cleaned out and flushed out and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, constant upkeep of maintenance and maintaining the garden and all that kind of stuff. So by the time I walk out that door, I'm filthy from my feet all the way up into my hair. That's how that day is going to go. That's just how this lifestyle is. And a lot of people don't like that, you know. I just want to be in a pretty place. Well, you know, if you want a pretty place, you got to take care of it, you know, and that means you're going to get pretty fucking dirty.
Yeah, that lifestyle too is that pretty place lifestyle is what has caused a lot of this ruckus, man. It's like you need a detox from that artificial living, right? It's not good for the body if your body's not getting 10 minutes of sunlight, if your body is not properly hydrating, your body's going to become a living cesspool, and it's going to show on your skin. If you're not cultivating good relationships, if you're not moving your body, you're going to, you know, your muscle is perishable, your knowledge is perishable, your relationships are perishable. It takes continuous hard work. You got to do it. I don't know how to convince other folks, you know. I think too, it's like the impossibility if, you know, your body's completely deconditioned, right? Let's say you're obese or you're at that borderline or that threshold where you have too much mass on your body, you know, and it seems like an impossible task to try to balance that out. It's like, so why even try? That struggle's going to be a difficult struggle. And
I like those stories where, you know, you see somebody that's just morbidly just a human wreck, you know, and somehow they get turned on. And 2 years later, you see what was hiding behind all that nastiness, you know, and you hope that they don't become obsessive and compulsive with the new gift that they have, that they take care of it properly from then on out. And, you know, while I was finishing up that degree, whatever I would learn, I would put it into practice almost immediately. You know, there was there wasn't enough time in the classroom. There wasn't enough time in the lab that I had to take the initiative and put some things together. And then I was posed the question, hey, Mark, you know what corporate wellness is? And you heard me before put it into the context of force protection. Yes, I think I got a grasp of what that could be, you know, if people would buy into it. And I initiated, you know, the corporate wellness program for that campus. And it was for staff, it was for alumni, it was for family members, it was for current students, you name it. And I provided for it. But I would be down at the school, damn thing. I'd be down at the school at 6:15 in the morning, you know, that's going to be the first workout. Whoever shows up for that. It might be some old woman in an aesthetics class who's just learning how to improve her balance. And it might be, you know, learning some old things that she hadn't practiced before. But what I did find out from some of these people, because I used to counsel this one older woman, her husband, I think he was an Air Force officer, but he was dying of lung cancer, right? And not only that, she had her daughter and her granddaughter living in her home as well, so and Hispanic. So you can only imagine the type of guilt being put on this woman, and then also the pressures of trying to get qualified professionally to go and continue to help make money for her family at 65 years old. Okay. And in bad physical condition. But that's what we would do in that first morning session is I just got her moving and I told her why. And some days all she wanted to do was talk. It's like, we're going to talk and walk. Okay. Because this is about fitness. This isn't about counseling. Okay. We can counsel while we go. And she got to the point where she could climb stairs, she could hop. Okay. Her balance improved completely and stuff like that. And so the word got out. So then there were some other younger people that wanted to participate and stuff, but I only have 30 minutes to get something done. I was like, you show up on time, I guarantee you, I'll put you through some circuits that will just wear your ass out. And I do it with them too. Okay. So here comes session number 2. Okay. And that session would be over with. Then I have to address myself. Okay. But if somebody didn't show up that morning, you can bet I was taking care of me. That way I didn't have to wait till the end of the day when I'm already exhausted to take care of me. And I would also lead these corporate wellness discussions every Wednesday afternoon at lunchtime. Dr. Council would come in and some of the other department heads would come in, and we'd have an agenda already set aside. I invite the DAV to come in, VA people, stuff like that, to come in and talk from that perspective. I was releasing newsletters, all that kind of stuff. And it was pretty successful until the president of the IBMC school system decided they were going to close that campus. They were going to close the doors on that campus. Some of us were grandfathered, because we only had like one more semester to do. And so they weren't going to kick us out of there, but we were going to finish up as a collective, and boom, there goes the program, and that's pretty much what I wanted to do, with an idea that I had approval for a small business loan. And unfortunately, my marriage collapsed. Doesn't mean I still can't do that. I can do that right here at this place. I could convert this place, but the family doesn't want the liability. See, so they're preventing me from my livelihood in that excuse. I'm like, you guys are going to lose this place. You don't have cash flow from either of the two businesses because they're services that can't be open during COVID-19. Okay. You're tapping into your own freaking financial resources, and I'm offering you a legit business that'll make you fucking at least $2,000 a week if you let me do it.
Yeah.
Still haven't taken me up on the offer. So just take care of me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that is a component that needs to be had everywhere. I going to school now too. So they only have like the kids that are face-to-face, cohort A. The only thing that they have is a lunch break, and in the lunch break, they're able to go outside and stand, 6 feet apart and just breathe in the air. And then once that little lunch break is over, it's back to the class. No movement, no nothing. This, not being able to, be functional is going to be the end for a lot of folks in COVID-19.
Yeah. I mean, I don't train with a mask. Don't get me wrong. I should be, but I don't. And I'm not worried about it.
Well, you're also in a somewhat isolated location too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I if there's a day where it's windy, I kind of worry about it.
Yeah. There's some anti-terrorism 101, right? Path of least resistance. Don't make yourself a hard target. I've operated in enough areas that were dangerous to know that I'm not going to be living in a state of fear. Of course, I worry about being asymptomatic, possibly transferring it over. But the work that we conduct, it requires face-to-face. So, I comply with whatever needs to be complied with, and I move about that way. But two, at the same time, it's like, you live in that state of fear. It's also going to break down your immune system. It's also going to, allow you to get sick, maybe get some false positives in terms of what kinds of symptoms you do have. But I'm not going to live in fear, but I'm also not going to, be the result of, more social division And, I respect people's decisions and what they do, mask or mask not. They're still human beings. That's their decision that they make. So that's the fine balance that I find myself in. And, I can't make everyone think that way, but that's just how I view things in terms of that. Everything is.
That's very smart, how you view it. You just know when to apply your own force protection measures. Under what particular conditions are the likeliest places to be exposed. That's good.
Yeah.
Freaking dry here today, man.
It's humid out there.
No, it's hilarious. Days leading up to the event were not unusually warm. Okay. And then I spoke to Jeff last Sunday, and he's like, well, did you get the first 11 miles out of the way? And I'm like, what are you talking about? It doesn't start till tomorrow. He goes, hey, bitch, today's the 6th. And I was like, no, it's not. Today's the 5th, man. He goes, better check your watch because today's the 6th. And all the while I've been planning for a Monday start, not a Sunday start. And when he called, it was like noon or something like that. And it was already fucking blazing hot, man. And I'm going, no, it is the 6th. Oh, no. And so I started at 5:30 that afternoon. And you probably read that email. I was at like a force march. It was just way too hot to be running. And I had to wait till night fell. Then I ran for like the next 2 hours after that in order to get more mileage. And then the next day wasn't any better at all. Matter of fact, it was worse, And I was like, how is this even possible? Who threw this dice and came up with this plan? Thanks, Lord. Fucking feet are mouthing off because it's so hot out there. And got about four miles done that day, and I couldn't breathe. It was just horrible. And Philip said, well, he calls me up and he goes, well, what's the smoke like right now? And I told him what the conditions were, and I took a thermometer outside, and it was 120 degrees outside. I'm going, yeah, I'm going to get sick if I keep this shit up. Something's going to happen. And so I just stopped, and I was thinking about 10, 11 o'clock that night, going out and finish, the rest of it. But instead I woke up early the next morning, and surprisingly, the temperatures went from, 120 degrees down to, like 67 degrees, something like that. And I was like, get dressed, go knock out the day 3 stuff. Okay. And hopefully the temperatures will sustain. You can knock out the other 7 miles right after that. So I came in for about an hour, rehydrated, because I just got finished doing a 4-mile circuit course, and every one of the stations had 3 different exercises that you had to do, around undulating terrain. So I came in, ate, rehydrated, and just went out and just gutted out 7 more miles, and I was done by, I guess, 11:30, something like that. Then I could just kick back and relax. But I didn't call the shots on weather. That wasn't my show, man.
Yeah.
So it did have a level of it sucked.
Yeah. We had a fire team, man, in 2011. They took the same route, to and from their location that they were supposed to be at. And Taliban put in an IED, took out a fire team. 3 dudes got shrapnel, and the one guy was just kind of shell-shocked. Anyway, higher, I immediately, as soon as we found out, told my guys, gear up. We're getting ready to push out. because they were, alone out there, and the nearest adjacent unit was us. And I was told to stand down by company, and I said, "Who in the hell? Like, why am I standing down?" And I told Staff Sergeant Hawks, I was like, "I guarantee you that we're going to end up having to push out there." And sure enough, man, after the medevac came, picked up these guys, you had one fire team out there, and I'm getting my ass reamed by Hire on why we haven't left to provide security for these guys when they were the ones that gave the damn order to stand down. Okay, so I'm upset, and we're looking at a good 6 clicks away from. So we were at PB McKinley, and they were beyond the midway point, which was called PB Moeller. It was an observation post we set up in a place called the Playground. So man, it's July. It's about 120 degrees, and you have all that gear on, and it's go time. And man, I've never pushed that hard. And by the time I got there, my entire body was just in, spasms of cramps, because that's how fast we pushed. And we ended up getting there. Thank God an adjacent unit, convoy had pulled up, pushed down. We ended up escorting the guys back. But the entire time, man, both of my legs, just nothing but cramps, man, cramps. And I got to OP Moeller, which is around like 2.5 clicks away from that, where the ID had gone off, man. And I had to stand down. I could not patrol back. My entire body was just done. Just how fast we lost the fluids, and just how much the op tempo was, to the point where you're deficit in nutrition, right? Because you're pushing so fast, and you're already deficient in your nutrition and your electrolytes. And I was one time where I was really, really scared that I wasn't going to be able to fight. I've never felt like that before. And it's just like, every time I feel that heat coming in, I know to prepare. So
the first time I saw a massive amount of heat injuries, I was in 1-9, and we're doing our workup for UDP to Okinawa in 1981, right? And this is Camp Pendleton. I got there like 3 or 4 days after Reagan was shot. Okay, the assassination attempt took place while I was on leave, and so I was like, I'm getting out of here. We might be going to war. So I didn't know. I just wanted to get back into a unit, and got my gear 1 week, got my weapons, got all my shit, that first week of checking in. And they put me in 3rd Platoon, Bravo Company, 1-9, 3rd Herd. And we flew out to a place called Case Spring, which is up in the mountains at Camp Pendleton, right? We fucking did a hard landing in a 53, and got out of that, and the weather was just starting to get hot in Camp Pendleton at that point. Okay, like desert hot. And so we're up in Case Spring, running up and down hills all fucking day long, patrolling all night, digging in fighting positions. The whole SOP has to be practiced. And then on Thursday morning, we did a battalion movement from on top of the mountains to get back to Camp Horno, where 1-9 was located at, right? And dude, it was so fucking hot. Dudes were just falling down out of column of twos. They were just falling out by the sides of the roads. Okay?
Oh man,
they were all fucked up.
The dying army.
Yeah, and so we got to this one place by Las Pulgas where artillery had their base, right? I think it was 11th Marines, and there were 2 6x trucks, what they called 5-ton trucks or whatever nowadays, MTVR or whatever. But they had 2 of them, and there were corpsmen in the back of these trucks with piles of dudes with no clothes on, dumping igloo coolers of fucking ice water on these guys to try and save them from fucking frying their brains from the heat. Yeah.
That's hard living, man.
Hard fuck living. That was like 20, 30 dudes, man. We're all fucked up like that. Dudes laying on the side of the road, drinking salt water and shit like that. I mean, that's how we did it back in those days. You know, the company gonna be like, "You fuckers, it's so hot today. You better make sure when you open up your sea rats, you keep your fucking salt, okay? Because you're gonna need that shit later, you know, for the next water stop." And that's how the rest of that summer went too. You know, we slowly but surely like weaned ourselves of weak fucking dudes, you know, and got dudes from other battalions transferred into 1-9. And by the time we split in August, that was a rough crew. Those dudes could do any kind of mileage under any kind of fucking, you know, weather, man.
I had a similar event with in 29 Palms going through CAX. It was I think it was an illegal. It was illegal to do it. It was non-regulatory. So we had been doing lane training all day, and it was at the time that we were still using those Spartan vests, you know, those thick ones for convoy ops. Oh man! So all day, you know, train, lane training, and then all of a sudden, the captain, Captain Gaskell gives the order for the entire company to do a company movement back to Camp Wilson. And we're talking, it's nighttime, man. We just been moving all day. And we, you know, people were pissed, right? So we're moving. And once again, Kingdom of Heaven, you know, whenever that army is like heading to fight King Saladin, that's exactly the dying army. The company just spread out. And, man, guys are dragging their weapon systems. I made it back to Camp Wilson in formation and collapsed. I was fucked up, man. The next day, you had like busloads of dudes going to the Naval Hospital to get checked out, man. He got in trouble for that. It wasn't allowed. And we didn't have like the water resources, nothing, man.
Oh.
Yeah, it was a mess. I recovered from that, but man, I made it. And it was the saddest thing that I've ever seen, man. But that was some hard living too, man. I hated those damn Spartan vests, man. They were so, you couldn't do anything in them. You know, it's just like being a fucking walking tank. I was so glad when we ended up getting those Eagle plate carriers for mobility. But man, heat cases, man. I was a heat, not a heat case, so to say, in terms of being registered as a heat case, but more than 3 times I've had, you know, the damage done to me where I understand that, you know, if I continue with this, you know, being exposed to the sun or the heat like this, it's not going to be good for my body.
No.
I hated the humidity in terms of doing big movements like that. Hated it. But
Philip, the other night, you know, we're telling each other fucking Ranger school stories, and I had this guy who was my Ranger buddy, this big ass fucking West Point cadet named Stein, was my Ranger buddy, right? Well, fucking Stein was a chow fiend, you know, so he was always trying to find extra chow, you know, around the platoon and stuff like that. He was a big boy, and we were down in the Florida phase in Eglin Air Force Base, and they call these 3 nights, they call it the Trail of Tears, going through this fucking swamp, right? And so Stein was like the radio operator that night. Okay, my little ass is carrying an M60 machine gun through that shit with my ruck on and stuff like this, and fucking Stein goes into like quicksand. Okay, and we're trying to haul this big ass dude out of there with sling ropes and shit like that, and it's hot as fuck. You know, it's like midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's still hotter than Hades down there, man. It's like, you know, operating in fucking Southeast Asia or some shit at Eglin Air Force Base is bad, and so everybody's dying, you know, and we're gonna get water till tomorrow. From fucking conserve your water, you know. We're like, shit, we never saw this shit coming. So we finally dig him out of this quicksand, and, you know, we're stumbling through mangrove swamp the rest of the fucking night. Guys are losing their minds, fucking yelling and screaming out there. Shut the fuck up, man. You know, just stay on security. And next morning, we go into our patrol base, and the only two people that are still awake is me and Stein, because I got the machine gun, you know? And so he's over there doing maintenance on his fucking weapon system and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, we get attacked, right? And I know I got a functional machine gun, so I just said, well, isn't anybody going to fucking help? You know? So I get up, and I just start chasing people with a machine gun.
Stein's Barcelona.
Stein's over there rebuilding his M16, and we're chasing dudes all over the place. We captured one and shit. And so fucking the RIs go, hey, that's a major plus spot report. You two go get some fucking sleep. Make sure you got a good fighting hole and stuff like that, right? So I go in there, I wipe my gun down, get it oiled back up and all that shit. And I lay back, and I start hearing like a bumblebee flying around my head. And I'm going, what the fuck is that, you know? And right when I was getting ready to open up my eyes, that motherfucker landed right there between, you know, the bottom of my fucking upper lip and right underneath the bridge of my nose, and just bit the shit out of me, man. I must have been to it. My fucking face just swelled up. I looked like a Cro-Magnon, man. I was in total fucking pain. And so they hit me with epinephrine. It didn't work. They hit me with something else. I immediately passed out. Fucking 3-4 hours later, I wake up in the medical center, and I'm going, how in the fuck did I get here? You know, and there's Stein sitting over there eating a bag of fucking crackers, eating, man. And so I wake up, and you guys want some Gatorade? I'm like, yeah. They had this big igloo cooler over there, you know, and it's an HVAC clinic too. I'm like,
oh wow. R&R.
Exactly. I'm over there just guzzling, you know, Gatorade and water. And they finally say, you guys are going back out to the field tonight. Get your shit. So we go out to the field, and we link up with the platoon. And this was going to be a medevac night, right? And because we'd already been, you know, not in the field all day long, we got to be the fucking dummies. So these Rangers are carrying us in they're carrying us on litters under these conditions. It is so fucked up out there, man. We're getting dropped on our faces and just fucking drowned, you know, in fucking muddy water, and it's hot as fuck, you know. And so we had to endure that for like the next 4 hours, you know, going into the nighttime in a jungle environment. And then they finally said, okay, that's it, Mosier, fucking get back on patrol with everybody else. You know, we're going to do this hit in the morning. We're going to do this raid and shit like that. And like you said, we were drug out. I mean, that fucking platoon must have been drug out 6 miles in the swamp, you know. And we do our hit the very next morning, consolidate, fucking index, and then they say, hey, you know, there's a bunch of you guys that got to get medevaced out. A lot of people got hurt last night and sick and shit like that. So, you know, Mosier, I want you to take your fucking squad down this hill, go down as far as you can, and you're going to run into a spring. And it's fresh fucking cold water. Go down there and get all these guys in that fucking spring and get everybody cooled down and drink as much water as you possibly can, because we got a long fucking movement tonight. We're doing a fucking amphibious raid on Zodiacs. So you're going to get some exercise again today. You know, we went down there and it was like paradise. You know, the water was fucking totally cold. We could drink it just right out of the ground. It was percolating straight up. It was perfectly clean, clear, fresh water coming out of that thing. And I was like, holy shit, man. If this is what the Garden of Eden's like, I'm fucking staying here. I ain't going.
Right. That's awesome, man. Oh, shit.
But, yeah, I mean, the suffering, man. You know, the general public doesn't have a fucking clue of the pain, hurt, and agony that grunts go through, man. And then, of course, the devious shit that we come up with in order to, you know, punish each other even worse.
Yeah. Fuck. Yeah.
We had this our company Gunny Henninger. He was old school jarhead, man. I mean, we'd be out there 25 fucking miles out, and we still got like 15 to go before you get back to Camp Horno. You know, it wasn't just McCrest hikes. You know, the fucking CO had been enlisted in recon. The first sergeant was a forced recon Marine. The company Gunny was a forced recon Marine. One of the platoon sergeant was a recon Marine. We had a bunch of fucking wild men, you know, that were our staff NCOs and officers at that time. And, you know, they really you never got yelled at by these guys. They were straight up fucking professionals, and you did not want to fucking, you know, disappoint them. It wasn't about pissing them off. It was about disappointing them, because you knew that if you pissed them off, you weren't going to hear about it in public. You were going to be getting your ass fucking chewed in the first sergeant's office, or worse, probably being rolled up by the MPs and taken to the brig. And they didn't want to deal with it that way either. They would do it administratively. Nobody ever got fucking beat up by them or anything else like that. There was just this expectation of try as hard as you can. And then if you got to get back up, fucking ask for help. If you can get back up on your own, fucking let's go. You know, that was the mentality of the time. And it still is, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, I made it a point, man, to never falter in my physical fitness. I remember when we hit the fleet the following Monday, our senior guys, they had just gotten back from a deployment. I think it was from Fallujah. They tried to run us to the gate, but we were fresh out of, Camp Pendleton. So it's like, this SLE level stuff, you're not going to get us. And it was me and Gutierrez and, the only Hispanics, Mexicanos, man, we were fucking speed demons, but they couldn't get to us. And I've always, that always stuck with me, is that always stay in shape.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Shit, man. I remember when the day I walked off the plane in Guam, okay, because I'd left Camp Pendleton after ITS or SOI. And it was winter when we left Camp Pendleton. And then we come off the plane in Guam, man. It's just like, boo, just going into a fucking iron ore refinery. It was just so unbelievably hot. And then we get to the barracks. We landed at, what's that Air Force base? It's there. Anyways, we landed at this Air Force base. We got picked up by this Filipino sergeant Marine, took us to the other side of the island, checked us in. We got some equipment, and then by that afternoon, we were back at that Air Force base in the field providing support to guys that were in training.
Oh.
Just that fast, right? And, of course, the Filipino sergeant was our troop leader for that. And so we're hanging out, and these super hot chilies grew wild on Guam, right? And so I'm trying to build rapport with this guy. He goes, "And you guys like chilies in your food? Guamanians really love these chilies here, right?" I'm a fucking dumbass private. I was like, "Yeah, let me try those. My grandfather, he'll just sit there with a jalapeno and eat it, fresh, right off the vine and shit like that, Holy crap. They said my face turned fucking purple because it was that hot, and I couldn't drink enough water. And I was just on fire like that for like the next 2 hours. And that's how my first day on Guam went. It didn't get any easier after that. But what I did find out, though, there were two walking posts, 2 patrol posts that were outside the limited area. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to learn those patrols and be out there for that. I didn't want to stand in a tower post, for 4 hours or 8 hours or whatever and just be there just dying from boredom. I wanted shit to do. And eventually I got senior enough to where, Mark, you got your pick. Which one you want to do, Mike Papa 4 or Mike Papa 5 tonight? And then eventually became Mike Papa 2, which was driving in the vehicles, you know, and then, of course, Corporal of the Guard was right after that. So those were like the senior posts for actually going out and doing stuff instead of just standing, you know, posts. But that place was always just nasty hot all the time, you know. And that in of itself, because I was always patrolling those posts, that enabled me to have the humping capability and endurance once I got into the infantry with more load on to be able to keep up, you know, with the real grunts, and evolved from there, you know. But you were always just about that close to just, you know, some type of heat incident. Yeah. And then I've seen a bunch of guys go down too from cold, and that gets pretty weird too, because they get disoriented and you can't, you know, get them to cooperate with you and stuff like that. I've seen this guy had like 0 body fat. He got hypothermia coming out of the ocean one night, and we were required to carry sleeping bags with us during that time of the year at Camp Pendleton. And I had to get one of my fucking big boys in that sleeping bag with this no fat dude, get completely fucking naked and spoon him until he was warmed up enough so I could medevac his ass.
Yeah, dude.
That's fucked up.
Only in the infantry, man. God almighty. Hey, I don't know. Oof. About the coldest I've ever been was we had just gotten, you know, the orders that we're going to be invading Helmand Province. And fucking our CEO, who had kind of done something to gain his CEO position, got all gung-ho about it. And so this motherfucker tells everybody, yeah, you're going to get more time with your family and you're going to get more liberty. And right before we do, this op, so everyone's all, stoked, but it's not true. We end up in the fucking field. And it's one of those off, crazy snowstorms that happened in March of 2009. And I remember, man, it was cold as shit.
Oh.
And everything started freezing. We're hiking. We finally hit our location. We set up the defense. We have guys on, post. Everyone, lays down to rack out, right? It's like, 25, 75. I wake up, man, in the middle of the night. Like, no shit. I see white everywhere.
Oh, boy.
Man, I grabbed all my shit and I put it in my sleeping system. And I just I was so fucking exhausted, man. We had started at 02 in the morning and just had gone all fucking day. I went back into my sleeping sack and I racked the fuck out. I just remember waking up to hearing guys, what the fuck? All their weapon systems, all their boots, all their main packs fucking frozen, man. And for like the next 3 fucking days, sat in the fucking defense, freezing our asses off. No fucking warming layers, nothing, man. I lost like 10 pounds of mass. And here's the fucking kicker. The sun came out of fucking nowhere and melted all that shit. And North Carolina, fucking that humidity started to fucking rise the fuck up. And then one of our senior guys ends up losing his PEC 16, and we end up having to get on fucking line and police calling for that motherfucker. Oh man, once again, fucking the dying army, just dudes falling out from the fucking extreme, temperature switches. Mm-hmm. And oh my God, man, fuck that. That was some hard living too.
It was an Alpha Company 3rd Recon, and we're training at Pohakaloa training area on the Big Island of Hawaii, right? So you get this, it's like a mini Mew. We'll leave Kaneohe and we fly over and we do like a dress rehearsal for CAX, right? So you got your GCE and then all the other, components out there. Engineers are out there. In some cases, you might have Amtraks and helicopters and recons out there doing their thing. And of course, we're firing artillery and shit like that too. And so the day we're going to the field as a company, okay? So we're going to be flying in 46s, and it's like 95 degrees. Okay, 95 degrees Hawaii, but it's February in Hawaii. Anything can happen. And the training area is between these two volcanoes, Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa, right? And they've got white caps on top of them. So I know something's happening at night up there, you know? And I'm going, hey, you guys, make sure you bring gloves, make sure you bring extra socks, make sure you bring your field jacket liners, make sure you bring your fucking ponchos, because we had shit gear back in those days. But I knew, you know, loosening layers and the type of equipment that you should bring and the other type that you don't need, because it's just going to be more shit to carry, right? And we're going to build some field expedient shelters and stuff like that, just in case, right? Just about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, a little bit of water starts dropping on us, okay? And I'm going, that's mist. And if that's at altitude, it's going to be fucking snow before we know it, right? Then it starts pouring like crazy, and the temperature drops like 30 fucking degrees, man. And I'm going, shit, this is going to be a long night, man. And luckily for me, where my team's position was, there was like 7 or 8 porta shitters over there, you know? And I had like a fucking 8-man team, and I was just like, hey, you guys buddy up and get in those shitters and don't unlock them until I tell you to fucking come out, right? We had dudes pounding on those shitters. Let us in. We need to get fucking dry. And I was like, fuck you. We found these first, man. You ain't coming in here. We stayed in there pretty much all night until the fucking snow stopped. I've got some old pictures in one of my albums. I should send it to you, man. But one of my RTOs is standing there with Mauna Kea in the background, and there's fucking snow almost all the way down to the bottom of that mountain.
Fuck.
You know, we went from fucking 95 degrees down to freezing in just a few hours out there, man. That place, that sucked.
Oh, man. November of 2010, similar story. Fucking lane training all fucking day. Garrison was feeling benevolent, and he tells another platoon to get on a 7-ton that has an actual, you know, hatch over it to protect you. And it's November in the Mojave Viper, so the wind chill is it's just going through your bones. No warming layers. And man, I got upset. I was like, what the fuck are you doing, man? That could have been all right out of here. Oh, don't worry about it, bro. We'll be fine. And sure enough, man, we get this fucked up 7-ton with no fucking protection and just fucking fucked up ride, and I could not feel shit in my entire body. And it was one of those movements too. It's like when you're trying to get off the 7-ton and everything's so cold and you can't feel anything. It's like stone once you hit the ground. I'm pissed, man. And I'm just cussing at this dude the entire fucking time. All day they've been telling us, hey, you guys are going to get a fucking, you know, squared away Thanksgiving dinner. It's Thanksgiving, right? And I don't know what the fuck happened, but I told my Marines, I was like, hey, man, y'all go fucking set up. And me and a few other guys ended up fucking racking out in the porter shitters that were lined up at our bivouac site. And I passed out, man. I was so fucking tired and I was so fucking cold. And I wake up to Corporal, Charles ready. Sure enough, man, we get up. By the time we get through the fucking line, there's no fucking hot chow. Fuck, man. So every November now, it's just like we post up, you know, a porter shitter. That's how we spent fucking Thanksgiving in 2010. Man. Oh fuck. Somewhere in Camp Wilson, I guess they got the logistics wrong, and by the time the food got to us, there was fucking nothing, man. That was a miserable fucking time. They had just incorporated a new element to Mojave Viper called Chub 1 and Chub 2. So we were making jokes about the Chub, right? So the clear hole build, and that entire training got fucked up. The CH-53s, every time they dropped us off, we ended up in the wrong spots. They couldn't maneuver because someone on point didn't know how to, you know, navigate. And that was
what a time to find that out, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, that was yeah, they had just added I think like an extra week and a half to Mojave Viper. It was just yeah, that was ugly.
Pure fucking pain, hurt, and agony. We're so during the holiday season, if you're on UDP to the Okinawa, typically your battalion will be used as a maneuver element for relief in place for Army units in South Korea. Okay, so off we go. Here goes 1-9 and Bravo Company. It's freezing ass cold. You know, it's almost Christmas time in South Korea. You know, and if you read about the Chosin Reservoir, fucking, it's horrible. This is just bad. And we don't have vapor barrier boots. We don't have jack shit except, you know, leather boots and fucking field jackets, you know, and fucking the old style watch caps and black leather gloves with some inserts in them and stuff like that. And if you're lucky, you had long johns that you could wear as well. And most of us only had Alice packs. They didn't have mountain rucks for everybody back in those days. So whatever you could jam into your fucking Alice pack, including your shelter half and tent poles and fucking stakes and all that shit, we're going to be inside there. They wake us up. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, and get up, pack up. You got to get moving. Fucking, we got to light up the Rodriguez Range here in about 3 hours, and we got to get humping, boys. Holy shit. First sergeant and the platoon sergeants were out there with their flashlights checking the fucking bush. Dudes were just dumping shit. Fucking E-tool laying over there. Fucking second set of boots laying over there. They fucking lost their minds, man. They went totally off on us. You know, so we're out there in like fire teams trying to jam each other's fucking Alice packs with this gear, and we're so fucking frozen that we think we're gonna die out there. You know, your fucking nose is already peeling back from the cold. It's just eating your skin off, and your hands are so rigid and cold that you can't even manipulate your fingers anymore. Dudes are swearing that they got fucking frostbite on their feet already and shit like that. That was one of the worst fucking nights I've ever spent in the field in my entire career.
Oh, man.
We get to the Rodriguez Range and had a great time shooting and moving and communicating, you know, and doing our thing and stuff like that. And that picture that I sent you of me in Korea drinking out of my
yeah.
That was at the end of that day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But we had a humpback out of that. We had Amtraks, but the fucking Amtrak, they're going a different direction. You guys got to walk back. And we're like, fuck. How about a helicopter at least? Shit. You know? That took all the way until we got back then. And like you said, that fucking battalion was straggled all over the fucking Korean mountains at that point.
The dying army, man. That's a hell of a sight.